You know, I feel like it's incredibly complicated to know where to start because the film is so rich in so many different ways and obviously charts, you know, an extraordinary trajectory of Jane's that's, you know, so to speak, illustrated or physicalized in some very filmatic way by Alexandra. And you know, I feel like I could go into any piece of it and want to know more about that one piece, that one work. You know, everything from, did your parents ever see your work? I mean, this
No,
maybe is a small
they did
piece,
not.
but...
That's what freed me to start dealing with my history in the South.
Yeah.
My mother saw me, not me, actually. She saw someone at PS 122 at a benefit, I think to Amazing Grace. I can't remember. But once I realized my parents were never interested in coming up to see the work, I was freed to do it. And as I say in the film, Mark Dindy really gave me permission. I don't know if permission. He was there. He grew up in Asheville, near Asheville, and the drunk character he plays was his uncle. And he had already confronted all the racism and everything, and he didn't have to hide it. Even though I grew up in Oak Ridge, somehow that hiding was there, and it was probably part of my mother.
Right.
So once I realized they weren't coming, I was set free.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so fascinating, I'm sure, for everybody also in the audience who are artists and whose parents either supported or did not their work, you know, to think about that never happening. And, you know, having had, you know, hundreds of dancers in my company and hearing their trajectory, everything from no, my parents have never seen it, to they'll fly in from anywhere to see it, you know, or the dilemma that so many young people have now, which is when their parents are, you know, for Trump, and they have to decide whether or not to go home, you know, whether to have holidays, what do they do about, you know, that particular phenomenon. Anyway, one of the...
My brother is a Trumper, so I'm sure we all have something like that out there.
Yeah. One of many things, I had the privilege of doing a Zoom with Jane a few days ago just to talk a little bit in advance of today. And I think one of the things that might be interesting for the audience, among, I'm sure, many things, is what role you played in the editing process of the film.
She should answer that.
All right, fine.
See if this, okay. Well, you know, I think an important part of the film was to tell Jane's story from her words. And so, and also I'm not in the dance world. So I was looking, and actually we have one of our co-producers here who's also was on screen, Leslie Couget, and she's
Leslie,
here.
Leslie, where are you? Leslie, just stand up and twirl. No, that's not enough. Leslie is, and Sean Donovan, who played Anita Hill, were co-producers and editors with you, and they were the ones in the editing room. And I told Margie I was never allowed in the editing room, but I had a voice.
Right, I think there was a healthy tension because, you know, Jane's looking at her life on camera, and I'm looking at it also as telling a story that resonates, you know, tells Jane's story, and then also resonates in a larger way. And so it's this tension of what do we include? You can't include every piece over 40 years, but also kind of starting at this point where, you know, some of the work like the Clarence Thomas and even around Reagan and AIDS and the hypocrisy going on at that time resonated so much to me today because we were just getting out of COVID when we went through COVID while we were editing this, and there was Trump saying COVID's not a problem. Meanwhile, all these people, you know, drink your bleach, and all these people are dying of COVID, and it was the same, similar with AIDS and Reagan. So there were these moments in history that Jane captured as they were happening, and I found that really inspiring and important to tell that story, not only to tell it about history, but about today and what we're still facing in the hypocrisy and power structure. And so I think starting there, but then also making sure to tell this story of this artist and her specific plight.
And did you know from the very beginning, so to speak, the story that you wanted to tell? Or did it unfold? I mean, often, in making, quote, a dance or a piece of theater, you kind of start somewhere and it becomes something that really surprises you as you're making it and as it's unfolding. And was that true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We started working together for Jane's 40th retrospective, and we made these smaller videos that gave the behind-the-scenes story for making the work. And people really hadn't heard those stories of what went into these pieces that they knew. So we knew we had people who were interested in hearing a little more of Jane's process, but then also, when I heard about Oak Ridge, that town, I was like, oh my God, that in itself is a film. So it was collecting these moments and then, okay, how do we put it all together?
And so it's great because she is an outside eye and looking at this with another eye, which was, I wouldn't have put all that stuff in there, but then I would fight for certain things. That sort of smorgasbord of all the dances at the end, I really fought hard for that and needed to have that in there. But we would pick, and Leslie and Sean knew the work so well that they would be in with you, and we would just pick certain pieces, which I know you're making a film, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Which one do you do the dive into? So we picked certain pieces to do a dive. And how do you do the dive? I don't know if we told the story of Underground River with the puppet as well as you can. That's a total, people come out of that show weeping. I don't know why it is such a gut-wrenching piece. And there's no way, right, Leslie, there's no way we could find to really show it on screen. But looking at it again today, I thought, well, you get a feeling.
Right, you do get a
the
taste.
Delicacy of it.
I was wondering, Jane, what does the film not tell, and what might you be interested in telling that's not there? Did it miss something?
I never thought of that. I don't know. Honestly, if I had to be in charge of that film, I don't know what I would have said. I really don't. It's so great to have someone outside. Also, you're looking at New York. I wouldn't have had all those pictures of the wrecked cars and she's asking me now, you're like, I'm so struck at how awful New York was. And I'm like, really? So then, I could go to Donna Anna McAdams, and she's got all these photos, and she gave us all these. That's where you see the wrecked cars and the highway and everything like that. That wouldn't have not have occurred to me. You know how you just sort of live your life and you move forward, and that's your. And so she's coming in and seeing something more cinematic about my world and about New York City. And I think the tale you tell of New York and artists and the politics of the time is amazing. I couldn't have done that.
Right. Alexandra, you were saying when we just briefly met on the stairs here about you had grown up here and you had a relationship to New York, maybe a fantastical one, but that kind of became more real as you did this film and became interesting to you. Can you share that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here. My grandparents, actually my grandpa's in the audience, Mark Mariesh, but he was born in New York, so I had a connection. My grandparents were from New York. My mom was born in New York, but grew up in California. And when I was 13, we visited with my parents some of their artist friends who lived in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and it was in the 90s around this time, and I just fell in love with New York City and, created a little shrine for New York City and hoped that I would move back there. So this film was that era where Jane arrived and, it was gritty, but it was also, there's this freedom to I would love to hear but I think there's this freedom, and I think that's also what's so liberating for you inspiring other artists is, you've got a lot of technical talent and, but also you are free to, let's try this, let's experiment, and not everything has to be, you're reacting to events that are happening in real time and making work in reaction to that, and the body of work continues to grow. So not everything has to be perfectly polished. There's a freedom, and I think that represents that time in New York too.
Well, we were talking about studying with Merce Cunningham, and man, if you made a mistake in class, it was so bad. And at some point, I just decided to go to auditions, which you didn't want to do because you're so hoping to get into the company. And the first audition I saw was for Jamie Cunningham, and I went. And that was a real, who would have thought? I knew he toured a lot and wanted to be in the company. Well, I had to speak on stage, I had to do text, I had to sing, we had to play characters, we did tour everywhere. But when it finally came time because everybody made work, it was easy, it was cheap, as I say. Those gifts from Jamie were there for me. I was very comfortable speaking on stage, and I like to write, so the writing just came right in. I think had I stayed in the Merce world, none of that would have been available for me. And so it's funny how things just work out in your life, and also New York. It all felt possible for us. The Cunningham studio was sort of our little cult world. It was a cult. And we had friends there, and we stayed friends all these years. Winnie Perrin, all these people are still friends. But we just supported each other socially and made work and partied together, and it just we made ourselves feel like it was possible. And we were pretty blind to how creepy New York was.
I could go on talking with both of you for at least an hour, but I want to make sure, since we don't have a lot of time, that if there are questions from the audience, that we get a few. And the light is such that it's very hard to see. Yeah, that would be great if you could turn the house lights up.
Is it possible to turn lights up? Oh, great.
It's a black abyss,
It's a black
abyss out there.
Is there a question? Yes, in the back there, I think. Please, just stand up and shout it out. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just a piece of black. Yes, yeah. Yes. Oh, she can't. I'll repeat it after you say it, Karen.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So, Jane, one thing you left out, but I'm curious about, we met in the Peace Corps in Venezuela.
Is that Karen?
Yes,
Yeah,
Karen
Addicts, hello. And I forgot, there actually is a shot of you with Bill Young sitting in front of our loft with all the graffiti.
That's right. Okay, but so that's where I met Jane.
In the Peace Corps, everybody
Before
can hear
any of this, and we hooked up again at the Cunningham studio. Did those 2 years in that foreign country influence you at all in your later work?
So she wants to know whether, obviously the two of you met in the Peace Corps.
We were in Venezuela.
And she's wondering whether those 2 years had any effect that you're aware of on the work that you then came to make.
God, Karen, I don't know. That's a really good question. What was amazing about the Peace Corps, so I married my husband, and one thing was very clear, because of the Vietnam War, there was going to be a pivot, and we were going to have to get out of the country or something. So the Peace Corps was still available for deferment. That's why you were there. And so we ended up in Venezuela. I had been trained in French and Latin, and my gaze was to Europe, and my husband was saying, well, I think we're going to go to Latin America. And I remember when they offered, I think when they said Venezuela, I said, is that where Caracas is? I was so ignorant and knew no Spanish, and there we went and lived fourth class. We lived in a beautiful Merida, Venezuela, which is an Andean village. How high? How high was it, John? 6,000, 5,000 feet. It's so beautiful. And then spent 4 months traveling after Peace Corps, the whole continent, also 4th class, and seeing this amazing world that I never would have thought of. That was an opportunity that came. You know, in a way, Karen, don't you think, and everybody, if an opportunity comes to you and you just take it and you do it, and look what happened to your life. I feel really grateful in that respect. I used to live here too, by the way, in the summer of love.
We have time for one other quick question. Yes? Oh, you do? All right.
Lita Hayes, I'm going to have all these dancers stand up.
I
in a minute.
recognize you.
She was in the film, folks.
This is Alita Hayes, who was in the film.
She's a singer, you know.
I just want to say that before there was diversity, equity, inclusion, and everything, Jane always hired people who were talented and could do the work. And that is still sometimes not common it would be downtown New York or uptown New York or here even, not really. And I just want to acknowledge that because we always used to talk about it like, wow, where other people were not doing it, she would choose people who were talented. And that has influenced me. I've worked in a lot of universities and people are always amazed. But I think I learned just look for the talent, not for the race or the gender. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. It's really special to me. It's still special. It's actually still special. The other thing is that we always were involved with the family. Like, get in with the family or you're not in. I don't know. I mean, that was something else that was special. And that being in the company was being a part of a family. So as long as we were together, I can't explain it. It felt that way, and I think that's another very special quality, which the film is incredible, and I love it, but those kind of things that are kind of the river running through it, that's not necessarily something that comes out. And then the other thing that I'm actually interested in as a question is, I realized from standing outside of it, what a storyteller you are. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, like how you thought about. It's one thing to go, okay, Alita can sing and Mark and act, or this can do, and this person, but it's another thing to create a story from it. And I'd love for you to talk about it. And then the last thing I want to say is that I have to hear every day about devising theater.
About
and devising. As if we haven't been doing it in the dance world from the 50s, 60s. So, it's like dancers have been creating worlds and work in mixed forms for a long time. And now it's called something else. I don't know. I'm just saying I want to acknowledge you that you have always been doing that, and I'm really proud to have been a part of it. And I'd love for you to talk about your storytelling.
So I would just say that we don't have time for her to do that. But we can continue and move out into the lobby and people can continue to be in dialogue with Jane. And I just want to say what, a privilege it is to have seen this film and to get to know Jane in a different way, and how lucky we are to have it be provocative and evocative during a time that for all of us is so deeply dangerous.
I just want to do one thing.
Yes. Okay.
Because there are people in the audience who are in the film and in the company, so can you guys pop up? So that's Alita, Lisa, Karen is in the film, Leslie. Where's Leslie? Is Leslie? Yeah, there's Leslie Suchet. And then I want my college roommates to pop up who live here in town. I'm staying with. And there's a husband and my husband. So my husband took me away from San Francisco and delivered me to New York, but then I don't know if I would have been a dancer if I'd stayed here. I really don't. I worked for McCann Erickson advertising agency here.